Stay in your groups if you want. Are we good to begin? Oh, no, it's fine if you guys still need to talk. That's the whole point of this. No, you're good. Is there any group that would like to go first? So we're sharing our answers to number 4 around what would we want to implement. I don't know what your name is, but sure, go for it. Yeah, you just offered yourself up to speak for sure. No, let's focus on question 4.
Okay, so one of the major we talked about, I guess, a few things. One of the major concerns that we had was that there was no real formalized process to engage constituents, and that constituents were just sort of disengaged from council in general. They don't really know what we do. They don't know how we do it. They don't know what we go about doing. They don't necessarily know what we are as a council. We sort of discussed town halls and the fact that they were a good idea, but didn't necessarily get the engagement that we were hoping for from them in terms of engaging the constituents more and getting them to know what we were doing really on the USC. Anybody want to take anything else? Like major ideas we'd implement?
Just a potential idea. Sure. We're also throwing around a couple of other general ideas. Just throwing out the idea of potentially allowing for student petitions. So if there's a certain number of signatures towards a particular idea, it could potentially be brought towards council floor. That might be putting the cart before the horse, in which we need to get student engagement before petitioning students, but it's a sort of a thought. And then another idea we sort of had was potentially in terms of speeding up meetings or expediting meetings, setting exact time limits for council discussion, and then you have to vote to extend it, as opposed to the other way around, in which there's a vote to end discussion. Because, discussions often sort of go around in circles and don't really get anywhere. So another possible idea.
Any other notes from that group? No. And one thing to note, when you are presenting, use a microphone, please, because we will record it, just because we've got Liz taking some notes, but we also want to have a record of it as well. Which group would like to go next? Group number 4.
Hello. So, is it? Yeah, it's not. Okay. One of the things that we talked about is like the idea of like due diligence, as well as like what are we doing in council? Because we keep talking about, we need to engage more students, and I think it starts with, if I'm talking to so-and-so, student in the faculty, and I said, we're talking about this at council right now, and for the past couple of years, it's just been, we're talking about the principle of an idea. And I think that concept is, like, that isn't the job of 50 people in a room. It's the idea that an idea should go through committee, go through a thinking process, and should come to us, and we decide the way that it's implemented and all the little details. So we talked about a focus on sort of like the standing committees, so like potentially like standing committee meetings after USC meetings. A lot of the times at a USC meeting, there could be a good principled idea, but it's not thought out, so we say let's refer back to committee, and keeping that fresh in everyone's mind to kind of go through that thinking process is something we're interested in. Relying on the chair as a resource to the rest of council, like recognizing that they do play a really big role, and if I'm a councillor and I want to know the discussion that happened around a motion that's coming to council floor, that I can reach out to the chair and say, what was discussion like on this topic? Did anybody discuss this? So, yep, those are sort of our thoughts.
Anything else from that group?
Yeah, nothing should come to council without going through a committee first. Anyway.
Okay. Which group would like to go next? Go for it.
Do I need to say my name?
No, you
Oh.
can just share if you'd like. If you'd like to share your name, go for it.
Sure. My name is Nicole. So we talked about how the moment that we do something on council floor, it creates a change to some degree, because a lot of times we think that in order to make a real impact, it has to be something monumental that we do. But even when Liz said yesterday, one small little like policy change affects her job and then it affects somebody else's job, it creates a trickle-down effect that we don't always see, but it's definitely there. And then Karina also brought up a really good point about how even though people don't know something is done by the USC and council, it still creates an impact in their lives. Like, for example, the gender-neutral bathrooms. A lot of people, I guarantee, don't know who that was done by, but it still impacts in a positive way. Oh, and also we have council members that are very forward and confident in their roles, so they're able to advertise what we do on Facebook and social media and present it like to their friends and things like that.
Anything specifically to question 4?
Anything? Sorry?
Like anything that you would want to change or implement?
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought we were talking about the first one. We really agreed with not tasking the executive in motions. Danny brought that up yesterday because if you want to create a motion, you should take it upon yourself to go above and beyond to do the research and, yes, contact the executives, but not task them to do everything for you. And more emphasis on standing committees and using them to their full potential, because right now they're a little bit underrated, I'd say. A lot of people come forward with really good ideas, and there's rich discussion that happens there that's very valuable.
Thank you. Anything else? You guys good? Who wants to go next?
All right. Hello. So just to echo some of the thoughts around the room, so we really wanted, what came out of this group is to really focus on, yes, the subcommittee culture, but not only the subcommittee culture, a working group culture. So rather than all the policy formulation and thought-provoking discussions happen at the committee level, why doesn't a passionate group of 3 individuals around an issue make a working group within that committee itself? One of the things of discussion that came up within our group was the only subcommittee that currently exists is the LGBTQ plus subcommittee within student experience. So why does all the policy formulation have and the onus on the larger subcommittee at large, where passionate students and counselors can really get together and make that policy formulation at a different level, and then disseminate that information to the committee itself, and then when it reaches council, everyone has seen it and can voice their thoughts upon the motion, and then eliminate kind of the redundancies around the debate and the formulation of the motion itself. Another thing that this is give and take with the organization as well, for more training for committee chairs, so they can be a better resource to the organization as well in terms of having oversight of these many different working groups if they were to be struck by counselors. And information dissemination and resource sharing by, so making sure that staff, board, and the executive, the other 3 entities within the organization, are more available to counselors in terms of having these discussions and having these meetings with counselors as well. And Noam, I think, brought up better communicating our wins to the constituents and students as well. So working together as a council to really say, okay, we're here, this is our value, we worked on this for you, and kind of further engagement as well. Okay.
Anything that was missed? No. Last but not least.
Hello? Okay. So basically, everyone has said what we had talked about also with the committees, and really emphasizing that everything must go through committees before they come onto council floor. Something different that we kind of talked about that we could potentially implement was setting priorities for council for the year. That was something that was brought up yesterday. Picking 3 to 4 things that we could tangibly do, and kind of reflecting the political climate that exists for that year for council might be a good idea. But then we also talked about how it also might not be a good idea, because then council might be too focused on the specific priorities and not thinking about bigger picture things. But that was something that we were considering, that it could be a potential thing that we could implement. But yeah, other than that, just emphasizing the committee culture and working groups.
Anything that anyone else in the group wants to add? No? Okay. Now, the next question I'm going to add, and this is to everyone, is there anything that was shared there that you have strong feelings about either way? So you either think it's a great idea, let's do it right now, or there's no way that would ever work, why did they say, don't say it that way, but why did they ever say that? And the reason I'm asking that question is I want to get a sense of if there's any common ground here. Like, it sounds like every group talked about committees. Every group talked about how we need to strengthen committees. So that seemed to be a place where we can focus some of our work this year in supporting the committees, and I know that's a discussion I've had with the Secretary-Treasurer and the Speaker, and the President is about that very thing. So that seems to be one area, but that would be an example. So does anyone want to share one of those strong opinions?
I guess not necessarily opinion on either side, but I do agree with the utility of committees and the importance of getting things hashed out there before it comes to council. My one thing, though, not necessarily an issue with the committees, but rather the timeline of the USC and how our year is set up. Just the way that the fact that committees are once a month before meetings, if your motion gets referred to a committee, you have to wait a month for it to happen. And when our working year, our term is only really 5 months, it becomes difficult to kind of get things done, especially if it gets bogged down. So, like, for example, last year for the committee that Mitch mentioned, the LGBTQ committee, we weren't able to elect all the members for that committee. We still did what we could, but because it was referred to committee, it got slowed down by 2 months. And as a result, we had to wait and we had to work around the fact that we didn't have the full membership that the committee, well, the motion essentially mandated. So there is that aspect to keep in mind, that it is important, I guess, sometimes to get that research done, and definitely research should be done and consultation should be done before motions come, so no one's time is wasted. But I do think we need to kind of change up that timeline to make the committee process more appealing to members of council.
Okay. Other thoughts? Other extreme opinions? I know you're not normally asked for extreme opinions, but those are exactly what I want.
I agree with Frank, and I would suggest that the committees meet more often. Like, I think that would be, and while that is kind of scary when it comes to like time commitments, we discussed that like a 7-hour council meeting and like an hour and a half committee meeting is 8.5 hours. If you had a 2.5 hour council meeting and you had 2 separate committee meetings that were each about an hour, that's still less. So.
And that was an idea that one of the members in this group, sorry, I don't know your name, you had shared yesterday, yeah, that it might make sense to have some committee meetings happen right after council as a way to gather what was said at council and action it. And I heard that from a bunch of groups today, which is pretty cool. Anything else? Any other opinions that folks want to share? I think there's one developing over here.
Our group kind of just talked about like the fact, like one of the recommendations that Pillar made was the 3 meetings per year, and from like the opinion of this group, like that was kind of like a really radical idea, just like with the feasibility of how our year is set up, with like the fact that we only realistically have 5 months as councillors to do our due diligence before election season starts and like the turnover starts. Just realistically, like the 3 meetings per year, just we don't really necessarily think will be the best to get what we want accomplished done.
Mm-hmm. And I did hear that from a couple groups as I was walking around. A lot of folks were like, 3 meetings seems like a little too few, but it's fine. Any other opinions?
Okay, there. Actually, something that we talked about, but I completely forgot about, was, and Pillar mentioned it when they said something about like there's sometimes more efficient ways that we're just kind of overlooking. We were discussing about like being more aware about each other's committees and like what committees are doing, and having a mechanism to like be able to just like look somewhere and figure out what committees are working on, so that if you have an interest in it, you can like reach out, or you can like redraft motions before they, and at least just like making it simpler and like to be more efficient in terms of like having all the information before you hit council floor.
Yeah, we actually discussed that as well. We said that maybe having all the minute meetings from the committees posted on OWL might be a beneficial source, because then you don't always have to go up and ask somebody to send it to you. You can just go look on OWL and it's there for you to look at. and then you can go approach the chair to ask for further clarification or to talk about any other issues you might have.
Thanks. Other comments? Okay. So, next steps on this are, we haven't talked about this yet, but I'm just going to look at Andrea and make sure it's right. I assume we're going to bring a report back with this information, right? Yes, great. So, we'll bring a report back to the next the next council meeting, outlining both what was said as well as I'm going to grab everyone's notes. If you did them electronically, I can put my email up here and you can email them. And if they're paper, I'll come by and grab them. And then we'll kind of summarize what we heard, and from that report will be some next steps. Is that fair? Second note, just a question for everyone. Liz and I were chatting while the groups were working, and we had realized, both Liz and I have worked here for 4+ years now. We've seen this council in many iterations. We noticed that you guys don't have much time exactly like this, where you can talk not about the issues of students, but how you operate as a group. Did you feel this was a valuable use of your time, and is this something that should happen more often? Even just a show of hands, do people like it? Do they want more of it? Okay. Let's remember that too. I feel like we need to find a way to build this in, because the conversations you folks were having were great, right? This was a way that you could build some consensus around how this group could improve, which is something we don't really get. You guys just go right into, you get limited training, then you have to just do your job, and it's so hard to do the job that you never look at how you can improve getting to this point and getting to become a counselor. So it's a good thing to note that we'll try to find a way to build more of these sessions into your year. And then I'll go over here. Sure, just in case. Mitch, can you pass the mic?
The only thing I would mention or think is important to mention is maybe if this is if I don't know, I think most people found this to be a productive discussion. If we could do something like this, depending on what the schedule for the year is, potentially midway through the year or potentially towards the end of the year, because I know for a lot of new counselors this was kind of maybe a bit frustrating as to because they don't know what the role is, and this is very new. This whole weekend was very new as to meeting people, understanding their role, understanding council. There's a lot of information, I think, and for a new counselor to come in, I know last year I don't think I would have been able to come in and analyze how the council functions if you've never seen it before. So that would just be the one thing that I'd mention, if maybe potentially at AGM 2 or something where you could even get the outgoing council's feedback or incoming, something where it's everybody all together, so that the new counselors coming in are not expected to analyze an organization that they've never seen function.
Sorry. That's a great point. One thing I will say is I did listen to a lot of the first-time counselors speak yesterday, and you guys had no problem picking it up. I would challenge you and say you did a great job of being able to provide feedback. So there was a comment over here.
What I'll mention is I really when Nick and I were talking about having a session as a follow-up, we didn't even know what we'd be following up on. At the time, we just thought, oh, it might be nice to have a discussion. And we were kind of thinking about how should we do it on the council floor or not. And we made the decision to kind of take a recess and then do this kind of informal setting. And I must say, I don't know how you guys feel, but I found it quite helpful in terms of having a little bit more informal when council is usually really formal. And what Flo said about being a new counselor and finding it difficult sometimes to navigate, to the point that it might be a little bit difficult when you come in to be able to speak right away. I thought that so if you guys are can provide any feedback on the kind of informal nature of this, and if that's something you would like to do again, that'd be also great.
Do you want that right now or in the future, at another point? Okay. Any other comments? Okay, and then there was one?
My point was very similar to theirs. I think working with people that we don't work with all the time, people that aren't our friends, and people that are old counselors paired up with new counselors is really, really productive, because sometimes the new counselors do feel nervous. We were kind of talking about that too, how nerve-wracking it can be to sit on council floor and to say something not knowing what the reaction's going to be. So having that verification from somebody else and having, a group working together, and sometimes I know that could go back to standing committees and working groups, but sometimes just having somebody else, facilitate the group just to ensure that we're not always working with the same people all the time, because ideas build when everybody discusses with different people all the time, so we can get different opinions and stuff before things come onto council floor.
Okay, thank you. I know I've taken one more minute than I said I would. Sorry, Madam Speaker. Final thing I will ask, and I'm going to ask you this. Last night was supposed to host a movie night in a park behind my house. It got canceled, so I have a lot of popcorn left. Would council want popcorn? And Madam Speaker, are you okay with the noise of them eating popcorn? Yeah? Okay. So I'm going to bring a pretty big bag of popcorn. I'll put it over there. But that's all from me. You'll get a report at the next council meeting from the Secretary Treasurer and myself. But thank you for engaging in the discussion. That was great. And I turn it back over to Madam Speaker. Thanks for taking notes, Liz. No, I don't think they do.
Please be seated. All right, so seeing as it's only 10:20, we're going to skip lunch until it is 12 o'clock, which is when lunch is scheduled, and move on with our 4 action items for today. So first, our first motion is the motion to amend Bylaw 2 to include special procedures for USC conference rooms. This motion was moved by Councillor Ma, and I will look for a seconder. Councillor Rocchese. Okay. Councillor Rocchese, would you like to speak to this motion?
Vanessa Rocchese, Health Science President, also Vice Chair of Governance and Finance. So given the nature of summer meetings, we didn't all get to fully discuss the two governance finance motions to the full extent. But those of us who did feel like it should be brought to council just to vote upon. The one issue actually about this motion that we had that was brought to our attention was just concerned about the amount of conference room time that will be taken away from other clubs and groups. So that was just one of the issues we talked about, but otherwise we just wanted to bring it to council floor to see what your opinions on it were.
Okay. Any questions regarding this motion? Okay, we will now move into debate, and I will take names for the speakers list. Yes, President Pratt.
I'd like to defer my speaking rights to Karina Gabriel.
Okay.
Hello, Karina Gabriel, SPO. I just want to say a couple things on that, Vanessa. Councillor Rocchese. In regards to the concern about the conference rooms. So essentially, I have gone through this process, and actually all of you, in regards to the interviewing of the SPO candidate. So one thing that I did do is I worked with Charles on was ensuring that that space would actually be available during the SPO election. So I actually have here a confirmation for room 370 during the 2 weeks of the SPO election. For sure, of course, that can be canceled if this motion doesn't go forward, but it is a confirmation that that room is already booked for those 2 weeks should this be passed. And in regards to the concern about taking that time away from other clubs, so that is one of our, I think it's like 7 conference rooms that we have, and this is the election for one of our 5 executives of the USC. It is a really important, I would say, thing to be taking up the conference room for 2 weeks. And of course, it'd be the CRO that would be organizing to ensure that each candidate has access to that space. So.
Thank you. Councillor Rocchese?
Just a point of information. Would all of the SPO potential candidates, would they all be in that one room just sharing the space?
Mitchell Pratt, deferring speaking rights to Karina Gabriel.
Procedure's important. Okay, so what would happen is, like, of course, this is up to the CRO as well, because there's a certain amount that obviously we can't dictate, but I imagine it would be like every day for 3 hours, you would have, depending on the amount of candidates, you'd have access to this room, dependent also on your class schedule, when you're available, so that every candidate has that room privately to themselves for a certain amount every single day.
Just 2 things about point of information. First, you don't need recognition from the speaker. And second of all, as a resource member, Karina, you don't need speaking rights deferred to you to answer a point of information. Cool. Great. Okay, next on my list, Councillor McCauley. Okay, Councillor Barroso.
I just had a point of information, point of clarification, I guess. In the wording of this motion, it says, like it's talking about, like, in general about, like, campaign processes, and then it says especially in the case of SPO. So would this, like, in the wording of this, like, would we be under the assumption that, like, every election, like, all the, like, for example, like, all the councillor elections, like, would we be under the impression that we have access to a room like this running as a councillor, or are we exclusively doing this just for SPO elections or like Senate elections or whatever? Like, is this for all elections in general, or is this just for SPO? Because, like, it talks about just, like, in general, and then it says especially for SPO. So I'm not sure who to direct that to.
Councillor Rocchese, would you like to speak to that?
So it was brought to us just like this, obviously. But I think it was brought to us by Karina's guidance. So I think if she would like to make an amendment, then to make it just for SPO at this time, and then in the future, if we want to extend it to counselors, for example, then we can. But just to make the wording more specific, you can just amend it to make it just SPO.
If Karina can't do it, I can.
No. That's why. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I can. Yeah, I can propose an amendment to it. So hold on. Like, I mean, this is like, yeah, up to the discretion of council, but can I propose like just like remove the especially, just like in the case of student program officer elections, I think.
You would like to remove?
I see.
I think Vice President Chang could potentially clarify.
For the fans on the live stream, the concern about especially the SPO is in the whereas statements. It's not actually in the policy that's being changed.
Yes, Councillor Danesi.
Councillor Danesi, so is the intention of this to have it just for the SPO or to have it for all elections? Because if it's the intention to have it just for the SPO, then the actual amendment to bylaw 2 should probably reference that, because right now the actual wording that we're trying to change bylaw 2 to just says any election. So the intention is just for the SPO or for all elections?
Karina, would you?
I can. Mitchell Pratt, UC President. So basically the intention was, the spirit of this motion is for SPO candidates, considering they have to meet with roughly 90 individuals over a period of 2 weeks. So the onus is really on these candidates to really book these meetings, and often these take place rather informally in the spoke, or the candidates actually have to travel the long distances, whether it be Kings or actually like walk up to Brescia. I knew many candidates actually had to travel around campus, and this also might make it a more formalized process, I think, and this is why I'm speaking in favor of this motion, is that it could be a much more thorough process, I think, within these conference rooms, to have this space, to have this more silent, more formalized space for our counselors to do their due diligence in interviewing every SPO candidate, I think, as well. Thank you.
Councillor Macaulay.
Erin Macaulay, Ivy Councillor. I would like to ask if the executive has looked at the usage rates for the conference rooms during elections. I know the elections committee books out a conference room, so that brings it down from 7 to 6. And then do we usually see them being fully booked out during that time of year, or are the usage rates lower?
Thank you, Councillor Macaulay. We have looked into the usage rates, and they actually, because this time period is more structured around exams, their usage rates actually have gone down, and we can probably produce the numbers for council in a follow-up email as well.
Vice President Chang.
I was going to motion to amend bylaw 2, just the beginning that says candidates for student programs officer. In 11.9.1, the very first word, candidates for the role of student programs officer.
Okay, so it would read, the students programs officer shall not campaign in the USC main offices.
I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Okay. I saw a placard. No? Okay. Councillor Yee for Councillor Sun.
Frankie, Science President. I feel like the motion as is, even though the principle of it is for SPO candidates specifically, I don't feel that the current way it's worded, where it doesn't exclude other candidates, is that big of a deal. I think the motion is fine as is. I don't feel any amendment is necessary.
Okay. Councillor Teja.
if we did want to focus it solely on the SPO candidates, we would amend section 11.9.1.1, saying, in the case of SPO candidates, the USC main office shall not be taken to include USC conference rooms. But I don't think that it particularly matters either way, up to council whether or not we want to specify that in 11.9.1.1.
So is that an amendment or just a statement? Okay. Councillor Chang?
Motion to amend 11.9.1.1 to begin with, in the case of the election for student programs officer, comma.
So then it would read for 11.9.1.1, in the case of election for the student programs officer, comma, the USC main office shall not be taken to include the USC conference rooms. Yes? Okay. I'll look for a seconder for that motion to amend. Okay, Councillor Yee. Any questions regarding that amendment? Okay, any debate regarding that amendment? Okay, any objections? Okay, seeing no objections, I will take that amendment as approved. We will now return to debating the motion as amended. And seeing no further debate, we will call the question on the motion as amended. And polls are now open. All right, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed. And the motion passes. Okay. On to our next motion. Motion to amend Bylaw 2 to allow for USC employees to work up until the campaign period. This motion was moved by Councillor Ma, and I will look for a seconder for this motion. Councillor Rocchese. Okay, Councillor Rocchese, would you like to speak to this motion?
Sure. So, like I said before, not everyone on the committee was involved in the discussion about this, but we did feel like it needed to be brought forward to council floor. That being said, as it currently stands, as the motion says, candidates do have to, they can't be in their positions not only during the campaigning period, but also during the nomination period, and we did feel like that was a little too, it was just too much. So we did think that that should just be reduced to just the campaign periods. That was our opinion as a committee, what we discussed. So, yeah.
All right, any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Teja?
I'm Teja Huron, President. I'm just wondering if you considered in committee the process of creating a platform and whether a candidate who does not step down before the campaign period starts should be allowed to have discussions with individuals on campus regarding creating a platform before they've officially stepped down from their role.
Councillor Rocchese?
We did not have that discussion. Like I said, it was a very limited discussion.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this motion? All right, seeing none, we will now enter debate. Yes, President Pratt.
I'd like to defer my speaking rights to Courtney Gabriel.
Okay.
Never mind. Mr. Pratt speaking in favor of the motion as it currently stands. I do believe sometimes students do depend on these funds. I think working within these roles. I think we need to be working in consideration of this. I think this is the spirit of this motion is admirable unto itself, and I thank Governance and Finance Committee for this.
All right, any other debate regarding this motion? Councillor Teja?
Inam Teja, Huron President, speaking hesitantly in favor of this motion.
I would be curious as to know what the other thoughts and opinions are from councillors around the table regarding whether or not having an individual who works as an associate or a coordinator be sort of working as well at developing a platform publicly would interfere with that role, support that role, or how that would play out as they would still be an associate, assuming that they develop their platform through consultations prior to the campaign period.
Councillor Barroso.
Councillor Barroso, Science Councillor. I was just wondering, I guess for clarification maybe, if so currently as it stands, they're required as of nomination period to step down from their position temporarily. In the way that you've like phrased this, do you are you now forcing them to stay, or can they still take that leave if they feel it's necessary?
Councillor O'Casey.
So this was just brought to us. I don't know the intention of the actual motion.
Councillor Foreman.
Jared Foreman, Social Science President, speaking strongly in favor of this motion. And just first addressing what Councillor Tasia said, platform consultations take months. It's a long process, so asking people to step down and step aside from jobs and funds that they depend on in order to develop a platform, I don't think is really that necessary, and for that reason I'm strongly in favor of this motion. Just sort of reiterating what President Pratt said earlier.
Okay. Councillor Yee.
I was just going to echo the sentiments of President Foreman, but.
Okay. Councillor Majinian.
Theodora Marginian, USU Science Counselor. I just want to clarify Victoria's point, Councillor Barroso's point. I did not draft this motion, so I don't actually know, but just the way I'm reading it right now, it says it's called Motion to Amend Bylaw to allow for USC employees. So I would assume that means that you probably can still take maybe the leave of absence if you want, but it allows them to work up to the point. Am I correct in assuming that?
So as it currently stands, like they can't, so that they have to take a leave of absence. It's not optional.
No, I meant that they can take the leave of absence when they hand in the nomination form up until the point of the campaign period. Like that's a grace period in which they can take the leave of absence.
I think
but it has to be done by the campaign period.
I think it has to start at the nomination period. So when the nomination's open, if they're being nominated, I think they need to take a leave of absence if they know they want to be nominated.
But this amendment to the appendix, does it mean that they can take the leave of absence at any time from the nomination period to the campaign period, or does it have to, like Councillor Barroso was saying, they have to work up until the campaign period?
That I'm not sure of the intentions of the motion, but I see what you're talking about and like how it's worded.
Councillor O'Casey.
Vanessa O'Casey, Health Science President. I'm speaking in favor of the motion, just because also for it might be very difficult, especially for counselors or something, to find a replacement for their role. I'm not sure how it works at the coordinator level, if they have to replace themselves or like they need to find someone or someone else needs to find someone, but for certain faculties it might be just difficult to find someone to replace their role on council for the several weeks that they have to take the leave.
Vice President Chang.
So I'm speaking in favor of the motion. I want to clarify that if we're talking about anything regarding council itself, council other than the 5 executive are not employed by the USC. And this would be for the employees of the USC who are receiving money from the USC, and that any of those individuals can take a leave of absence at any point, recognizing that it would be a very visible sort of conflict of interest if they were publicly doing these sorts of consultations as well as still working at the USC. So I think we're getting a bit too in the weeds right there.
Councillor Kamenetsky.
Just a motion to amend 7.6 where it says she and her. Can we make that a they?
I think that's like convention. I think it's Commonwealth convention, like the Queen. That's why it's not a gender thing.
Would you like to continue with your motion to amend or revoke it?
Rescind.
Okay.
Yeah, that.
Okay, Councillor Tasia. Okay, Councillor Denezi.
Councillor Denezi, Science Councillor. I think this kind of goes back to what Councillor Tasia was almost getting at maybe, but I feel like, especially for something like a SPO election, it might be problematic having somebody on the inside of the USC almost be in that position in the lead up to the election just because of the ease of access to the people voting for them, people on council. So I think that's something to consider. I know it's prohibited to use an advantage that you gain by virtue of your office, but I just think it could be problematic if someone internal to the USC almost has this easier access to people on council.
Councillor Yee.
I think just on that point again, like the rest of bylaw 2 outlines very specifically what type of meetings a candidate is allowed to have before the election period officially starts. And like Jared mentioned, these platform consultations take months if you want to build a strong, stable platform. So having considered that and just considering the fact that, especially for employees, we're talking about salaries that they use to buy groceries, we're talking about salaries that they use to pay rent. I don't see the harm in allowing them to work up until the campaign period. I don't see that being any influence to sway an election one way or another.
Point of order, Ken.
Yes.
Point of order, when councillors are speaking, can they start with if they're speaking for or against the motion?
Yes, thank you. Okay, Councillor Marginian.
Point of information, since I would just like to know more about this topic, because I don't. If the USC employees have to take the leave of absence when the nomination period starts, what is done up to the campaign period to fill in those gaps? Like, what's the current procedure for that? Does anyone know that? Speak to that,
President Pratt.
So the point I was going to make, and Mr. Pratt, just in context, speaking in favor of this motion as well, in response to your question, the point I was going to make last year as well is we had 4 associates out of the office for I think an entire month in the throughout the course of this election, and the associates actually do a lot of the work for the executive as well. And I think there is no policy in place in order for them to. There's no work absorption, I think, from other levels that goes straight to the executive, or the onus is placed on the coordinators themselves that the associates may oversee in order to facilitate their working roles as well. So it does put a bit of a burden, I think, upon the current time period.
Okay. Councillor Macaulay.
Just a point of clarification, you mentioned that they have to take leave at the beginning of the nomination period. It's at the point which they submit their nomination form. So a candidate can choose to wait until the last day of nominations to submit their form if they would like to work throughout the nomination period. And that's something that was seen last year. And to fill those gaps, usually someone is promoted, so a coordinator will receive the hourly wage of the associate while they fulfill the associate role during that time. Or a coordinator perhaps will have an executive on their committee who is then promoted to coordinator and receives part of the honorarium.
Councillor Casey.
Vanessa Casey, Health Science President. I'm speaking in favor of the motion. I just want to speak to a point that another councillor mentioned about certain people having more access than others. Technically, everyone has the same amount of access if you just go to the respective parties involved. If you, whether that's attending council meetings or going up to the UC office and talking to whichever party is involved, everyone has that access. So just wanted to put that out there.
Okay. President Pratt, I don't know if you had your placard up.
Withdrawn.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I do have Councillor Yee on my list. However, he has already spoken twice. Would anyone else like to speak or defer their speaking rights? Vice President Chang.
Motion to call the question.
Right. Any objections to calling to question? Okay, seeing none, we will call to question on this motion. And polls are now open. Okay, and 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed and the motion passes. Okay. Moving on to our third motion, make kosher and halal meals available on campus. This motion was moved by Councillor Kamenetsky and seconded by Councillor Barroso. Councillor Kamenetsky, would you like to speak to this motion?
Nicole Kamenetsky, social science counselor. I just wanted to point out, I know yesterday and today we talked all about not tasking the executive. That's not the spirit of this motion at all, to task executive. That's just the way it was amended in the meeting because we agreed in this, student experience standing committee, because we agreed there were areas that needed to be researched further. So if I could table this motion and the next motion to the September students experience standing committee, I'd like to motion to do that.
Okay. I'll look for a seconder for that motion to table to refer to committee. Councillor Barroso. Okay, all in favor of tabling both these motions until the September student experience committee meeting. Okay, that motion to table passes. Okay. Okay, moving on to our fifth motion for the continued support of transgender and non-binary students. This motion was moved by Councillor Foreman, and I will look for a seconder for this motion. Okay, Councillor. Okay, Councillor Foreman, would you like to speak to this motion?
Jared Foreman, social science president. So in the spirit of our discussion earlier today, this motion has been sort of a lot of the actionable clauses has been taken out and as well as amended. So essentially what this does is it's basically continuing the work that came from the LGBTQ2+ committee last year. And since the committee isn't meeting until the school year begins, we're just looking to continue with improving sort of the signage regarding all gender washrooms throughout the campus. And then the other piece is just solidifying the work which started last year in terms of a transgender day of remembrance in November, which will be done with the student programs officer.
Councillor Sun Yi, would you like to speak to this motion?
I'd just like to, I guess, bring to attention of everyone with motions like this, and I mentioned this last year when the previous motion was introduced, that with the debate and however this vote goes down, it will speak about who we are as a council and the priorities that we choose to have and the communities that we choose to stand behind. Having said that, this motion was also built with consultation from members of the trans and non-binary communities, so this did have input. It wasn't just me and Jared who were writing this.
Okay, thank you. Any questions regarding this motion? Councillor Teja?
Inam Teja, Huron president, speaking in favor.
This is just the question
questions,
period.
right? In question, the motion that's on the screen, it is different from the motion set out in the agenda. Would you be able to sort of just high level explain what changed?
So basically a bunch of the actionable clauses were taken out because a lot of the work is just ongoing regardless, so it's not really necessary to have it in the motion. All that's remaining is, I believe it was the first actionable clause in the original motion with slight amendment, and then the last actionable clause in the motion also with slight amendments, just in terms of grammar and wording. But that's the gist of it.
Okay, any other questions regarding this motion? Okay, seeing none, we will enter debate. Okay, seeing no debate, we will call to question on this motion. Okay, polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed and the motion passes. Okay. Motion 6, amendments to the 2018-2019 USC Council Legislative Calendar. This motion was brought forward by President Pratt, and I will look for a seconder for this motion. Councillor Foreman. President Pratt, would you like to speak to this motion?
For clarification, upon further review of the Mr. Pratt, USC President, for clarification, the changes were brought to the legislative calendar as we've encountered the issue last year where the Vice President actually had missed AGM 1 and AGM 2 of Council due to the fact that they coincided directly with Partisan Higher Education Dinner and USA Spring AGM, which are both integral commitments to the role of the Vice President. And so therefore we are shifting the Council meetings in order to accommodate these dates to ensure that the newly elected Vice President can attend both AGM 1 and AGM 2 of Council, because we believe it to be important, just for further context.
Councillor Foreman, would you like to speak to this motion?
Jared Foreman, Social Science President. So as someone who went on the USA-GA last year and wasn't able to attend the AGM, that was sort of disappointing. It's very important for all members of the executive to be there. And with that, I would like to call this to question.
Okay, I will look for a seconder for that call to question. Councillor Teja. Question? Sure.
Can I just confirm that this is in compliance with bylaw 2, because it's very, like, the number of days post-election when you're supposed to have the AGM, and I just want to confirm that you did look through bylaw 2 when changing these dates, because a lot of consideration was put in towards them.
Mr. Pratt, USC President? Yes.
Okay. Okay, any objection to calling to question? Okay, seeing none, we will call to question on this motion. And polls are now open. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Polls are closed. There. And the motion passes unanimously. Okay, not quite time for lunch just yet. We will move on to our 4 information items, starting with the executive reports.
It's on the Google Doc? Nick, can you come help me with this? Nick, can you email it to Liz? Can you email it to Liz? Can you email it to Liz? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Maybe a quick recess. Maybe a 5-minute recess.
While we're just setting up the presentation, we will have a 5-minute recess. Please help yourself to popcorn. And I will see you back here at 11 o'clock. That's the end of our recess, and we will continue on with our executive reports.
Is this on? Hello? Hi. So I sent you all the long form version of our exec reports. It's just a lot to put on a PowerPoint to condense what we're doing this summer in 5 bullet points or less. So if you want to look through that exec report and follow along as we go through the presentations, that would be great. Thanks. Oh, I shared it on Facebook. And if you're not part of the council group already, let me know and I'll add you. Okay, bye.
Send it to Liz, maybe. Okay. Hello, everyone. So I will try and steer away from my typical tropes of saying I will keep this brief because it may not be as brief as I promise. Hello, my name is Mitchell Pratt. I'm your 2018-2019 USC president. We haven't met yet. I hope we have met. But I'm going to be launching into our first executive report to you guys. So make sure to listen, ask a lot of questions, and and you can always follow up with us at any time, and I really want to stress that. So just a little context behind, I think, my reporting structure. It's going to be a bit more, I think, long-term in vision and kind of like general oversight as well. So if you have questions about like specific metrics we're trying to hit per the 2015 strategic plan, if you guys haven't read the strategic plan, I really encourage you to. It's great, fantastic. It's got a lot of stuff within it. So it's kind of me in conjunction with a lot of the other executives as well. So I think given that, I will launch into my report. So completed. So moving into the start. And not all of these are platform points, but I just want to keep you updated on kind of the high level of what we're doing at this point in time throughout the summer. So completed. Meet with the new provost. So if you're unsure who the vice provost is of the university, think of them like a lot of people have the perception that Dr. Chakma controls all the internal ongoings within the university. However, it really is the vice provost who oversees the majority of our internal functioning of Western itself. So formerly Janice Deacon, and has actually moved to Andrew Rymack, Dr. Andrew Rymack, who is the former engineering dean. So I have met with him once personally and twice with Danny as well, and we made sure to stress our student priorities for the upcoming year, and he seems very receptive to our student concerns, so we're trying to move into structuring more regular meetings where I can voice your concerns as counselors and the concerns of students as well. This is a very high-level position. We haven't had this level of access before, so it's an exciting time for us to be able to work with him for the benefit of our students. Okay, so, and another thing as well, so connect with all campus stakeholders at various levels, so administration, student experience, athletics, and City of London. So we have been in a lot of meetings, so largely our days have been structured around a lot of meetings. It's almost been hard to keep track at times with the many different stakeholders. So we met with Christine Stapleton from athletics, we met with Lynn Logan from operations and finance, we met with many different members within the administration itself to voice kind of our priorities for the upcoming year and as well as your concerns. So if you guys have questions about this as well, about who to go to within administration to achieve certain aims. Danny and I are kind of always ongoing having meetings with administration. We'd be happy to even bring you along, I think, at certain points too, to see what we do in these meetings themselves. I think would be fantastic. Okay. So President's Roundtable, we had our first President's Roundtable last night, so thank you for all the faculty and affiliate presidents who joined us for that. We talked the university budget consultation process and how we formulate budget submissions among us, all of us. So it's great to have kind of a shared and unified vision for that, and Danny can touch on that more so in his executive report. So, and as I said, so UCREW chair election. If you are unfamiliar with UCREW, I do not blame you. The advocacy union for our federal advocacy has just been renamed in the past year from AdvoCan. So this was a union started by Sophie Halpert in her year, and it has been changed to UCREW. So Undergraduate Coalition of Research Intensive Universities. So this is members of the U15 universities who advocate on a federal level on the federal budget submission. So I have been elected the chair of this union, and it is among some of our member schools include McMaster, U of T, Queens, Waterloo, Manitoba, UBC, Saskatchewan, and many others. And we're working on bringing McGill into the fold as well. So we go to Ottawa for a week every year to meet with staffers, MPs, and hopefully ministers as well in order to advocate for kind of your concerns, but on a federal level at a high level. So what we've looked at in our past call that I facilitated was looking at the PSSSP funding for Indigenous students. So this is grant system, and as well as a few other metrics we are trying to hit throughout this year, such as capital funding for mental health resources or many other different things that we can go to on a federal level and speak on your concerns. So current and ongoing, so preparation for the university's budget cycle. I'll let Danny speak more to this and more in depth. So negotiation with Western to develop solutions for the week of September 29th to prioritize student safety. So this is an ongoing process with the administration. We've been in a lot of discussions with them, and I was hoping to have more specific updates for you guys at this point in time, but this is a major concern for our executive, and it should be for council as well, in order to prioritize student safety on this date. Okay, so to come. So streamlining approach to mental health and wellness. So Thames Hall, yes, the allocation of resources to Thames Hall in order to make a unified space for our mental health resources on campus is a major win. However, that is projected to be finished 3 years from now, right? So we're thinking of what can we do in the meantime to ensure that we not only advocate for more resources, but prioritize cutting confusion around our existing resources on this campus itself. So Michaela and I have been meeting with Helen Connell, which you can detail more, who is the head of the university communications, to discuss why don't we create a more streamlined communications plan for our students that goes all the way down from the university administration to the USC to clubs like Active Minds, like to make sure that we are sharing a unified vision around communications to our students. Because the question I often ask individuals is, can you tell a student where to go in one sentence, what help they need or what support they need? And I don't think a lot of people can do that. I'm not even sure if I can tell a student in a cohesive manner, one sentence, where they should go to get help. So we need to make sure we're prioritizing cutting the confusion around our existing resources as well. So man-made long-term plan with administration for Broftel contingency. So this is negotiations as well. And as I said, we are looking to bring this together. So I've engaged with multiple stakeholders, including the mayor, including London Police, and all the members of the administration, including the new provost, about this issue. And we really want to stress again, we need to prioritize student safety in this area. And I hope to have announcements for you to come regarding that. And last but certainly not least, man-made sessions. So from the date of August 13th onwards, we will be hosting, the Western is offering free sessions for individuals who are looking to become more effective, I think, male allies as student leaders. So these are going to be facilitated by Annalise from Manova, who's the women's shelter, I think, within London. And I just wanted to extend an open invite to any counselors who are here who would maybe like to attend these sessions. You can reach out to me for more information regarding this. And I think this is a fantastic opportunity offered by the university for us to kind of better ourselves as leaders and how we can contribute our voice to be better allies. Yeah. And this is designed for the dudes in the room. So yeah. Yeah. Okay. That's it from me for now. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you again in September.
Okay, it's a bit hard to read, but this is my job, essentially, is the 4 different files. So I'll start with Western. So the Open Education Working Group final report. So this was actually created based off of the Open Education Day that was hosted by Science Council and the USC in November. And this obviously is like more like this has been a passion project of mine, and it started with the policy that was written in 2016 on open education. So this working group consisted of librarians, faculty, staff across the university, and they finished the report on how to make open education more of a thing at Western, and that report is now with the Vice Provost academic programs, and the USC has been a large part in that, so that's definitely a huge win. Lynda.com is something that we've been working on with the comms officer to kind of advertise to students. So if you go to lynda.com, lynda.com, and you sign in with your UWO ID, every student has full paid access until 2020 for this resource for professional development. So essentially they're like video learning tools for literally anything from how to code, how to network, and how to like play jazz piano, and it's all facilitated by industry leaders. It's a really, really cool resource. I highly recommend just check out the website, just like scroll around. It's really cool. Tell your friends about it, and we're working on a way to disseminate that information as well. When it comes to so the like first name process for students who don't want to use the name that is on an individual's birth certificate. The in-person process has been updated to allow students to update their first names on non-legal documentation, so such as your student card, for example. And so we've been talking with the registrar's office, and this is something that is continued thanks to Marie from Pride last year with the USC, as well as Landon. And so essentially by October-ish, students should be able to go get their student IDs updated with their first name of choice on their student card, and eventually in a kind of rolling out process. Hopefully this will happen with a UWO email, as well as class lists and so on and so forth. And the registrar's office is working on that currently. The next item is official Western documentation. So the registrar's office is looking to actually have a fully online PDF to your enrollment letter. So if you're looking at something for a visa or an RESP, essentially you would need to get an official letter saying that you're enrolled at Western. And so the idea is that around second semester, to maybe towards the end, the registrar's office would look to have that available, which is really, really cool. And the registrar's office is still trying to figure out how to do that for transcripts, because unfortunately with transcripts there's a lot more very confidential information, and so they have to look into the encryption process behind if you're able to get your transcript just through PDF. How are we making sure that your grades and your information are secure? So that's an ongoing process. And then just introducing ourselves to the administration at the university and other stakeholders at the university. That's been ongoing with all 5 executives. Looking towards the future, the Women in Leadership report that was tasked by council is pretty much in its rough draft phase, and that has been worked on by my Associate Vice President, Kat Dunn, and that should be going to council as tasked, but things are going very well. Next is we are looking at revising our policy papers on teaching as well as international students, and that's happening through my associate research, Jacob Ferguson. The other thing is that we are working now on the Academic Priorities Committee. This is essentially a roundtable of VP academics from your faculty and affiliates, and the equivalent of a VP academic, as well as the student senators. So ideally the chair and the vice chair of the student senators at the undergraduate level. And so we've actually sent out an email to all of these individuals, and we're hoping to meet to talk about issues that happen academically, and so that we can actually get things done in a faster timeline than usual. Also with that, on the university file, we are also preparing for the budget submission. So my associate research is also working on the budget submission based on consultations now with the faculty and affiliate presidents as to the kind of the asks that we are hoping from the university to consider in the 2019-2020 university budget. On the municipal file, we wrote a letter of support for automated speed enforcement in community spaces and school zones. So I don't know if you've seen next to the rec center, there's that crosswalk, and if you press the button, lights will start flashing and you can walk across. And so that is essentially what automated speed enforcement is, and we've written a letter to the Civic Works Committee on this in support, as we've seen these kind of things start to happen on campus as well. We've met with 2 of the mayoral candidates now to discuss student priorities within the city, which is fantastic. We are writing a community letter essentially, and so we've worked with the orientation team to craft a letter to be sent out to all local Londoners about Orientation Week, just about noise and bylaws, so that they're not shaking their fists about students, and they understand what exactly is going on. As well as I've been working with a charity orientation coordinator to connect with the mayor's office about OSERVs during Orientation Week, which is replacing Shinorama and has replaced Shinorama. And we are in the process of inviting all local politicians to go out and kind of see what students are doing in the community. We really are trying to make students kind of partners in the community and not just a nuisance to the Londoners. So I think this is one of the things that is really, really supporting that. We have connected with London Police Services. So especially going into September, when there's a lot of noise complaints and there's a lot of issues within some of the student communities with London Police, we've connected with them to talk about, how are we actually proactively addressing these issues? How are we making sure that students are being treated fairly as well?
To the future, we're continually meeting with the mayor and city councilors to talk about priorities within the city. Right now, we're reviewing our MOUs with the City of London as well as Fanshawe Student Union. So Fanshawe Student Union, we believe is a really key partnership that we can have when it comes to municipal issues like affordable housing, transit, pedestrian safety in the City of London. So that's something that we really want to focus on. As well as the municipal election coming this October, I'm going to really rely on all of you to help kind of get the word out. You can vote in the City of London as well as the city that you're from in the municipal election. And so I think getting out that vote and recognizing the things that we are concerned about when it comes to things like transit, when it comes to our landlords and working in the kind of the city context, these are really, really important. So we're working on getting that word out, and we have some programming around that. Sorry, I'm just over halfway, so bear with me here. Provincially, it's been a busy time. My first week on the job, we had a provincial election, so it's been pretty busy. So starting in late April, we had a transition retreat with both the incoming and outgoing steering committee members. So USA's board of directors is known as the steering committee, and so everybody who has my equivalent role at 7 other university, like student councils or student unions, sit on this board. And we essentially got training on our role as a board and how do we, strategically actually do things for the betterment of the students that we represent. And we also touched base on the provincial students vote campaign. Also within the City of London, I was able to attend announcements by both Doug Ford and Andrea Horvath in London. So I was able to see the leader of both the PC and the NDP party, and we engaged with the staff to talk about what exactly the USC is in the City of London. We had USA's Welcome Conference, where we did a lot of policy, lobbying, training, and we brought the presidents from each student union, so it was a good opportunity for Mitch to connect with his equivalents at other universities. And we were able to interact with a lot of different stakeholders. So when Peggy Sattler came to council yesterday with some of her points about like COU and all these different acronyms, if you look in the report that Michaela posted, I've tried to lay it out, but there's a lot of different acronyms in the provincial space, so feel free to ask questions. But we interacted with them, and at that conference as well, I was elected USA president. In June, we had our student vote campaign. If you're a summer student, you could just go online and print out a proof of residency, and you could go to the election booth, and you could just show them this letter, and they will let you vote, rather than you having to figure out, like, how do I prove I live in the City of London as a student here for 8 months a year. We put out a lot of videos and campaigns. I've also, in the report, I've outlined some of the media coverage we got, which is fantastic. We got coverage not only across the province, but across the entire country of what students are doing to get out the vote and why it's really important for students to vote. So it's really, really good for the brand of students. Also, after the provincial election, so Inam and I were able to go to the victory party for London West, London Fanshawe, and London North Centre candidates. We congratulated everybody via social media in person, and we've also connected with other alum and other people that we believe are important people in at Queen's Park now. We also I went to Toronto and we discussed the future of post-secondary education. So I was able to meet essentially like the USA president, but for like the Amit Chakmas of the world. And that was a really, really cool conversation about what we're doing as an entire education sector post-election. We had our strategic planning conference where we mapped out our priorities for the entire year, and I'll be sure to share that so you can take a look at that. I won't go into that now. For the future, we are writing, so Western is co-authoring the policy paper provincially on tuition, which is a really, really big paper for the USA General Assembly in the fall, which I highly recommend you go out for. Right now, USA is trying to position ourselves as the expert when it comes to post-secondary education because the new government could completely ignore us, but we haven't had to really, as well as other stakeholders, haven't had to build these relationships in the past 15 years with a new government, so we're really trying to position ourselves that way. And so we're hosting a conference, a policy symposium next month with stakeholders across the province as well as government, and I'll be on a panel with the Assistant Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Digital Government, as well as a senior partner at McKinsey, who is kind of in charge of leading the artificial intelligence front for, it's called Next Canada, and we'll be discussing technology-enabled learning for students. I'll be doing that next month. And then, last but not least, federally, same thing as everything else. We've connected with all of the local politicians federally. Right now, we're coordinating with the Women's Issues Network a MP shadowing trip in Ottawa, which is very exciting. And we've gotten the support of almost the majority of the MPs in London so far. And for the future, we are just preparing for the federal budget submission and advocacy at Parliament Hill. So, yeah, that's my report. If there are any questions, I can take them now. If not, feel free to just follow up online. Go up.
Hey, everybody. All right. I just feel like the podium is like taller than me. So I'm just going to hey. Okay, first and foremost, we'll let you know, didn't write the fun facts on the side there. So they're actually kind of true. But anyway, beyond that. All right. So if you thought that was fun, wait for the SPO update. Okay. This room is lively. If you, thanks, thank you, Elliot. Okay, so we can follow along also on the report online. So first and foremost, completed. So council tasked the executive before we left for the summer with a couple of things. So I'm going to go over two of them, and the third one is in the ongoing. So soft fee accommodation form. So council made it very clear that we want to stop or do as much as we can to lessen the burden that SOFs have volunteering in our community during orientation week. So they proposed the soft fee accommodation form, which I am happy to say will be rolled out next month. It's complete. So SOFs will be getting the opportunity to do that. We will be providing information on how to fill it out, a bunch of support, who to contact, etc. During next month. So the second one is the USC Sexual Violence Education Training, which I have 2 slides after this one, which will explain what we've got going on there. We have scheduled it, so I've contacted Annalise. It's September 22nd and October 22nd. I'll provide a bit of a refresher about what you all voted for, again, on the next slide, so we can go over that. But just so you're aware, it is done. Crisis counseling, fun fact. So we got to meet with CMHA, myself and my associate programming, Jacob Campbell, and we were able to secure crisis counseling during orientation week this year, which is phenomenal. So we're going to be having crisis counseling September 4th, 5th, and 6th, and then during the second week of school on the 11th, 12th, and 13th. So students now have this support during the first 2 weeks of school, and student health services during the evenings that night. And then Kings will also be having it actually on the 7th and the 14th, which is awesome. Okay, next one, Women's Safety Grant. So the Women's Safety Committee got together a couple weeks ago, and we were able to, we had $80,000 to grant to the community for projects related to women's safety, and I think we did 79,000 of that. So, phenomenal. We were on that committee. USC was a representative there, and we were able to provide a lot of feedback to ensure that our students are getting the most that they possibly could from this, and we're happy to say that really great initiatives are coming to our community soon. Really excited to see that rolled out. Events roundtable in April. So as per my platform, I said I'd like to have an events roundtable in April before we all broke for the summer. So all of your councils, I think it was actually a wonderful turnout. The VP student events or the VP events, however you name them, attended this roundtable in April, and we got talking about the year, and everyone was able to meet one another. So they should all know the names of the VPSEs on the different councils, which is great in terms of collaborating for the following year and in creating programming together, which is great. So partnership with Safe Cities is the next one. So Mitch and I were able to do this together with Dr. Annalise Trudell from ANOVA. So Safe Cities is an initiative that I provided a little bit more information on in the long report. It's happening for 5 years, and it's a United Nations initiative, and we were able to secure USC as a partner in the Safe Cities initiative. Essentially, it's making the London community a safer place for women and girls. So we're really excited to be doing work along that, and we're seeing how we can roll it out for the year. Some ongoing things. So as I mentioned, the 3 motions. The last one being the women's leadership and systemic barriers one. Danny mentioned it, that his associate is writing a report currently so that we can present that as a timeline for the motion indicated in the fall. I think it was October. So we'll be coming to council with that, but we're on the way to ensuring that that comes your way. Clubs. Some really fun stuff is happening in the club system. So first and foremost, we're trying to reform clubs training. So 11,000 of our students are in the club system, so that's a lot of our students. A lot of your constituents are in the club system, so we're doing what we can to ensure that we're hearing the constructive feedback and we're acting on it. So reforming clubs training. So in the past we've heard it's a bit dry, or some of the content in clubs training is not really what people want it to be. So we're doing a complete reform of the clubs training, so hopefully it's more dynamic, collaborative, more innovative, and we'll see how that goes in September. Club dance space review. So I met with some club presidents for some clubs that do dancing. As you've all seen in the UCC, they're dancing in various spaces, and it's not a good space for them. Sometimes it's not safe. So we met with them, and we're committed to trying to find a solution for them moving forward. Club space renovation and the survey. So we've recently launched a survey to all of our clubs asking what they want to see in a club space. What do you want there? What's currently lacking in the one that exists? How can we improve this moving forward? And as per the Pratt Chang platform, as well as my own, we'd like to do that renovation this year. Clubs emails. So currently the way club emails exist is that they're not very uniformed, and some clubs have emails, some don't. Some are bell.net, some are Gmail, etc. We're actually creating a uniformed email. We just rolled that out last week, and we've got nothing but positive feedback from our clubs, which is phenomenal. So they're very content with that, and that's great. Campus vibe. Many a time, you have all probably heard me complaining about Western Link. So what we are actually doing is, as per Mac's term last year, we are now, so my outgoing, Campus Vibe was instated. We're actually now piloting Campus Vibe, so we selected about 15 clubs who are piloting this until the end of the year. And then we're going to sit down with them, get their recommendations, talk it through, see how they're liking it. And if it works, we're going to switch out Western Link for Campus Vibe, which, as far as yes, Jared, yes, clapping, I agree. I feel that, which aesthetically at least looks much easier to use, much more intuitive. So excited for that. Danny mentioned the WIN MP shadowing program, so that's at the federal level. Danny's been a phenomenal individual in this, contacting our MPs in London to get them rallied, and we just had a wonderful conversation with my peer programs associate and my Women's Issues Network associate on implementing this for the year. So we're very excited. If anybody wants to know more information about the program itself, let me know and I'll give you that info. The Peer Support Center is getting a renovation, so it's on the second floor just back there, if no one knows what it is, or where it is. It's getting a renovation, which is extremely exciting, as well as a rebranding. So my peer support associate, Matt, is currently working with our promotions department to do an entire rebranding of the Peer Support Center to try and encourage more students to know what it is, how to utilize it, et cetera, to come and utilize its services. Orientation week, everybody always asks for an update on that. So orientation week is obviously ongoing, first week of September, if anyone didn't know. And very exciting stuff. So we're currently in the process of approving budgets and uniforms and team names, et cetera. It's definitely a lot of fun. The next one, so I've been working very closely with Indigenous Students Association and Indigenous Services to create a new Indigenous coordinator, which would be under my peer programs portfolio. Very exciting stuff. I've written up the application, and it's currently with Indigenous Services, and they're reading it through to provide some feedback. So look forward to that in September, in the new year. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Oh, nope. Haha. Just kidding. Okay. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. Yeah, so this is the motion that you all voted on before we broke. So it is essentially, actually it was last year's council that did it. So this says Western student groups, including professional schools, i.e. Faculty of Law, Faculty of Dentistry, Faculty of Education, councils and service societies, interested Western student governments be invited to the training. This invitation to the training be extended to all students who priority given to interested student governments. So all USC counselors are mandated to attend one of the sexual violence seminars that are happening in the fall. So as I said, they're September 22nd and they're October 22nd. Next slide. So wait, nope, where'd it go? There it is. Okay, so I even got a graphic made for you all so that you can extend this to your councils. So what happens is it's mandatory for all of you to attend, and then it's encouraged that you send this information to all of your councils to extend the opportunity for them to come, because we want to get this as widespread as possible. It's excellent training. Really looking forward to bringing it to the community. So I'm going to be emailing this to you all right after this meeting, and essentially this is just an aid to ensure that it can help you share this information to all of your councils and advertise it for them in September and October. So you all have to attend one and encourage your counselors, not your council members, to essentially send to attend one as well. Does that make sense? Cool. Awesome. Okay, that is actually it for me. No, I'm kidding. Okay.
Hello, everyone. Great to have you all here. Anyway, so I will start with the key projects. So basically, one thing that we haven't said yet, because I kind of want to announce it here, but part of what you've been doing this weekend, especially with Pillar coming in and the discussion session today, that's all kind of the part of this governance revival project that we approved at the board of directors meeting. And so that kind of all plays into the idea that we're just kind of trying to make sure that we're working as efficiently as possible, because the more efficiently we can work, the better we can serve students. So at the July 8th, 2018 meeting of the board of directors, we approved up to $20,000 in spending in order to facilitate a governance revamp within our organization. That's just kind of a ballpark number that we wanted to give ourselves enough leeway, and we're kind of just figuring it out through different discussions and meetings right now. So yeah, there was a report written by myself, Mitchell, and our COO that you met yesterday, Jeff, and we basically just outlined the importance of good governance and a couple proposed steps that we'd be taking. So you can see it in my report, but there's three kind of proposed methods, which is council engagement, issue identification, and policy rewrite. And we've gotten various layers into those different ones. For council engagement, that's kind of what you've seen yesterday and today. We just want to kind of engage you in figuring out what you think works and what you think maybe doesn't work, and how we can kind of create maybe a plan to improve that for the future years. Issue identification is mostly internal, so that's mostly working with our internal resources and kind of looking at our own systems, our own policies and procedures for doing things, and how we can alter those a little bit. And then policy rewrite and tracking is taking the, I don't know if you know, but at the policy manual was compiled and passed at AGM, and that's basically every single policy that we have. And a lot of those are outdated and a little bit like overlapping or skewed, or they're no longer relevant. So right now my associate governance is working all summer in order to relook at all those policies and see what changes need to be made, and that will be coming shortly to you guys to look over and approve. And then on top of that, we might go through an editing process and a second relook and kind of thinking of those decisions. So those are kind of the three processes that we're going to undertake. In order to see all of this, we found out that there's kind of need to engage all bodies at once so everybody knows what's going on. So we decided to create this steering committee, which has various stakeholders. So from the board, it would be the chair of the board governance committee. From council, it would be the speaker of council and the chair of the governance and finance committee. And from staff, it would be the chief operating officer, the senior manager of government services. You've met both of them. Nick was here today, and then Jeff was here yesterday. And then from the executive associates, we'd have the president, the secretary treasurer, and the associate governance. So that would be the steering committee for this governance revival project, and those are kind of the methods that we're going to undertake, and that will be in a combination of both internal and external resources. For example, Pillar would be an external resource, but Nick hosting the session today would be an internal resource that we're using towards the same project. So, yeah. Actually, could I just open questions for this specific one, just in case anyone is confused? Yes.
Is your report available online if we're interested in reading it?
The board of directors?
The governance revival one that you mentioned earlier?
That was the report I presented to the board of directors. But yeah. This basically covers all the information from, I kind of restated it in more council fashion and kind of updated on the work that's being done. But yeah. Any other questions? Okay, great. So I'm going to move on to everything else that I've been kind of working on. So completed, Michaela and I created the annual report. So that you will see shortly. I was elected trustee at Campus Trust, which I believe you guys voted, I don't know if you remember, but you voted to allow me to run in the election to become a trustee at Campus Trust, which is the administrator of our health and dental plan. And I ran for trustee and became trustee, which is really great because it ensures that Western has a voice in making those decisions. The next thing, I reviewed the first round of orientation budgets. I worked with the Money Talks program at Western because they do a lot of financial literacy, and I want them to work with my associate finance on that. And then I completed some of the task board of directors items, including the Project Avidius update and the board agenda policy rewrite. In terms of ongoing, going to the campus trust meeting, I saw some areas where governance could be improved. So I'm developing a plan with all the campus trust staff resources in order to develop a better governance plan for them to ensure that our health and dental plan is functioning as actively as it could be. And then I'm also developing a plan for creating an awareness around student fees, and we're hoping to release something in September so that students are going to be able to see what their money goes to. And then upcoming is a plan for further council development. So I'm hoping to run kind of a session a little bit like this for the council members that missed it, because I know during my year I missed council training, and I think it puts you at a little bit of a disadvantage if you don't have some of that background. So for all the missed summer sessions, we're going to try to figure out how to involve those counselors as well. And then we're thinking about a council leadership retreat in first semester, which we're kind of just in the process of scoping out. And then we're going to be setting the budget priorities for the year, and we have a couple finance-related items that are upcoming, and I'm in discussions about, which include creating a capital spending plan, a reserve fund plan, and focusing on accessibility, budget availability, because we've never really budgeted for ensuring that all students have access to our events and services on campus. And the last thing is building a plan for better awareness around the grants program and ensuring that we're also efficient in how the grants committee operates. So, yeah. Sorry, I went through that quite quickly, but if anyone has any questions, you can ask now or reach out later. Good. Great.
All right, hello. I'm going to keep this very short and concise. Most of my work you'll either see on some sort of form of social media. So if you'd like to see it, you can look at it on our Facebook page or contact me if you want any more info for just the general presentation. So the first thing on my report is that I updated the USC style guide to provide clear direction and formatting preferences. This will be used to provide with our coordinators and associates to give them more direction when creating graphics, making sure that as an organization we're represented clearly and that we're consistent in our imaging. The next thing is the Out in the Sun and the Pride social media campaign. I worked on that with Karina and our Ally Western and Pride coordinators to create graphics for the Pride celebration in London. You'll see them, they're going until July 29th. Which is the day of the London Pride Parade. So if you'd like to go and you're in London, you can attend. You're more than welcome. The next thing is website content refinement. As you might see on the USC website, if you go to westernusc.ca, it's currently under construction. Most of the links aren't really accessible at this point. You can still find all the information if you Google it, so if you have any trouble, let me know. But we're going for a soft launch in mid-August, and then it'll be ready to go by the time students get back. The O-Week opt-out is still there. All the features that students need are still accessible. It's just in a different format. The media relations, so the next piece is media relations initial touch piece. You'll read about this in my actual report, but I've met with all the news outlets in London and created a relationship with each of them. I'm hoping to continue this throughout the summer and meet with them one more time before September starts. I'm becoming more familiar with what their actual priorities are as organizations and making sure that we're communicating with them on a regular basis. The next thing is the Get Out the Vote campaign. Danny mentioned this. It's the USA Students Vote. Making sure that we're communicating with students. We created a video and released it to students to make sure that they're engaged and they're aware of the different resources that they had to vote in the provincial election. The next part is the MPP press release. We worked on this with Danny as well to make sure that we were communicating to students who their representative was in the London North Centre riding, which is where the general hub of students live, and communicating that out to them to make sure that our stakeholders in the community are aware that we support them on a public basis. The next part is the USC annual report. I worked on this with Andrea to make sure that we were creating a consistent vision and making sure that it will be aligned for further years as well. That will be available sometime after the Pride campaign. If you'd like access to it now, I can send it to you on Monday. The next part is all the to come. And this is the fun part. So the first Lock Your Fucking Bikes campaign. So basically this is a spin-off of our Lock Your Fucking Doors campaign, just communicating to students that bike theft is the #1 crime on campus. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it is. So making sure that students are aware that if they bring their bike to campus, they should probably have a good lock for it, and making sure that they're aware of all that information in a fun graphic. The next thing is the website and app revamp. So just making sure that our information supplied on our website and our app is consistent and that it looks uniform. Right now I'm undergoing a whole process of making sure that the website, if you go on it, it's, like I said, it's under construction, but making sure that it's simple, easy to access, and that we're reducing the amount of information on the website to what is really being used, and providing areas for contact and any questions. The next thing is the hiring of the digital content coordinator and student feedback coordinator. These are 2 positions that we'll be hiring this year under my portfolio. And yeah, we'll be sending out the applications sometime in early August. And the next thing is the USC reward card launch. So in previous years, we've had the USC Black card, we've had the Gold card, we've had the Platinum card. So I'm looking at revamping that whole system and just branding it as the USC rewards card. It'll establish some consistency for the organization and making sure that students are aware of what this card is. So I'm hoping that this name sticks in future years. That way we can ensure that students get some buy-in and want to be a part of this like fun perk. The next thing is the O-Week video. We're working on this, creating a script, and you'll see it soon-ish, O-Week. I don't want to give away any details yet. The next thing is the sexual violence education and awareness campaigns. I'm working with Karina to make sure that we're communicating this information in a very clear way, and that we're supporting those people who need access to resources. There's things like Safe Cities that we're working on, but this is all detailed in the report as well. I will also mention that we're working on a USC animated video right now, and that'll go on our website. The whole point is to basically simplify what we do at this organization, make it accessible to students, so stay tuned for that as well. Thanks. Any questions? Cool.
Okay, thank you to the executives for those reports. We will now have the report from the chair of the board of directors.
So unfortunately, Rebecca Little, the chair of the board of directors, can't be here today, but I'll just quickly go over what we did at our board of directors meeting. It was kind of the first meeting of the year, and it was our BOCO retreat in the summer. And basically, we elected the vice chair, which is a really important role, and we had our elections for that. We also went over all the previous board's tasked items. So I got tasked with 2 items, and some of the others, Mitchell also got tasked with 1 item, and that was mostly just providing updates to previous projects. And for me, it was also amending the board attendance policy. And once we went through all of those, we also voted on the governance revival proposal that Mitch, Jeff, and I presented at the board directors meeting, and that was approved in full. And that is about everything that was done during that meeting. So, any questions? Seeing none, that's great.
Okay. Great, thank you very much. We will now have the report from the chair of the student senators.
All right, hello. So I'm not the chair of the student senators. However, I'm here on behalf of Massimo, who could not be here. He's at work. I am the director of research graduate studies for the student centers. If you don't know me, I'm Kyle. I was on council last year. So first of all, the working groups for the year have been set, and the timelines have been made. So if any member of council was interested in volunteering for any of the working groups, you can let Massimo know. You can email him at m.perutz2@uw.ca. He wanted me to let you know that you can also track him down through Hunting Dog or Carrier Pigeon. So, the working groups. The first one is Missed Work Relief, which was a working group last year. We're going to continue working at that this year. The second is Fall Reading Week feedback and 3 exams in 24 hours rule review. So this one's fairly explanatory as well. They'll work in conjunction with the SPO and the orientation staff team to resolve schedule conflicts of O-Week 2020 arising from not enough teachable days in the year as a result of Fall Reading Week. Mental health and wellness initiatives is the third and final undergraduate working group. This one is intentionally a bit broader in the initial scope, leaves a lot of room for student feedback on ways for the university to increase well-being of students. Teaching assistantship availability is the graduate studies working group, and essentially what they're looking for is to increase the amount of teaching assistantship available for graduate students. Next big item on Student Center's plate is the issue with the genetics program accepting too many students and running out of space in required courses. This was brought up by the science senators. Unfortunately, this is an issue that Arts and Humanities is all too familiar with, especially with English and writing majors who are forced to deal with a similar situation every year. Massimo wanted me to let you know that senators are glad that this has been brought up, and it's bringing to light many issues with the enrollment process here at Western, but Student Senators is currently unsure how to proceed. We're doing our part to fix this issue at the moment, but with it being summer, the majority of the team is busy outside of London. Student Senators would be happy to take suggestions on moving forwards and are willing to work with council to resolve these issues for students. And that's all I have to bring you from Massimo. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me or him. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We will now have our reports from the standing committee chairs, starting with Governance and Finance Standing Committee.
Okay, so unfortunately, Charles Ma couldn't be here today, but I'm Vanessa O'Casey, Health Science President and the Vice Chair of Governance and Finance. So at our meeting in June, we had 2 topics for discussion that sparked conversation. So the main one was to create a new subcommittee, namely the Democratic Engagement Subcommittee. So the committee would look into aiding in the large-scale voter apathy that we've all been talking about, and would look into other options besides the slate system. And the committee would come up with more initiatives to get students involved in the elections. And we discussed whether it would be beneficial to have a subcommittee like this under Governance and Finance, but also student experience, since the mandate for both is very different. And some of the roles that were discussed are also very different and pertain to both committees. So for example, student experience would deal with the creation of new initiatives for the role. And we discussed whether it would be a permanent subcommittee or more like an ad hoc committee that's temporary and would be like rectified every year if need be. And another topic we discussed was the opening up the SPO elections to the student body. And we discussed that the UC counselors make the effort to meet with all the SPO candidates and do the due diligence in researching their platforms, whereas the general student most likely will not do that, and they probably don't have a lot of time or won't make the time to do that. So there's a bunch of potential issues with opening up to the student body that we discussed. Also, as mentioned that as members of the USC, we are held accountable for our vote, whereas the general student is not held accountable for their vote. And it was also mentioned that we just basically want to see how this year unfolds with the way the current voting system is, especially how it was changed the past year. So we just want to see how that works out before we continue to discuss this topic further. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we will have the Advocacy Standing Committee.
Hi guys,
pretty short report for you guys today. We didn't really have much on our discussions for our summer council meeting. That being said, we still have 2 priorities that we have kind of working groups formed around that are doing research. So firstly, Kieran is leading a working group on looking into the feasibility of banning plastic water bottles and other containers on campus, and looking into research around how we can go about reducing the amount of waste from storage containers on campus that we can work on with administration. And the other priority that we have is Ariana is actually leading our efforts into looking into the transparency of Western's investment portfolio, seeing if we can get some more clarification and clarity regarding where Western's actually housing its money. Apart from that, I was able to meet and congratulate the MPPs for London Fanshawe, London West, and London North Centre with Danny after their win, and looking forward to working with Danny and the new provincial MPs. And we're also getting started with thinking about how we're going to approach the municipal election that's coming up, thinking about some strategies for getting out the vote, and working closely with Danny's portfolio and meeting the stakeholders involved. That's it for me. If there's any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay, thank you very much. Next, we will have Student Experience Standing Committee.
Hi, everyone. So I wasn't able to come to training yesterday, unfortunately, but I did basically talk to a lot of people, and also with the discussion today about sort of the feedback, especially focusing on the committees, and we're definitely going to try to incorporate that going forward with student experience. We obviously had those 2 motions that we attempted to bring to council today, but then realized it would be better to bring those back to committee, hash them out a bit better, and hopefully we can bring those back sometime during the year in a fuller and better form. But if you do have any thoughts on them, as they were presented in the agenda, feel free to reach out to either Nicole, myself, or anyone on the committee, and we can definitely incorporate your feedback. At our committee meeting, we, as Karina mentioned, sort of went over that soft fee subsidy form, basically gave it like a thumbs up. So thank you to Karina and also Jacob Campbell, the Associate Orientation, and everyone with the orientation program that put that together. We also decided that we are going to be reviewing the Early Outreach Conference as one of our kind of mandated program and service reviews that we have to do. So for those of you that don't know, the Early Outreach Conference happens in early May, and it's targeted at grade 7 and 8 students to sort of expose them to post-secondary education and sort of encourage them to graduate high school. So we hope to have that review done by January so that any changes that we do suggest could potentially be incorporated into the next conference in May. Again, if you have thoughts or feedback on that, feel free to reach out. Karina also mentioned this, but we are going to sort of be working with her and the coordinators and associates to put together like a formal inclusivity and accessibility checklist that kind of any USC run events or club run events should strive to follow. Whether this takes the form of like an informal checklist or a more formal policy remains to be seen. And again, if you have any feedback, let me know. We also discussed legitimizing the severity of menstrual pain as sort of something that you can legitimately get academic accommodation for. Currently, Student Health Services really doesn't give that out. I believe they actually have like a sign on their door, Nicole, yes, that says that. So I think kind of Nicole and our committee will be working with the student senators sort of informally and getting that conversation going. And that is about all I have. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. If you have any questions now, feel free to ask. But other than that, that's about it. Cool. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. We will now have the chair from the Agenda and Council Operations Standing Committee.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so the Agenda and Council Operations Standing Committee, we had a meeting last week to approve the agenda for today. So we discussed about having the executive work with counselors, not just being tasked, and I think that's something we've talked a lot about this weekend, so that's great, and hopefully we see that moving forward. And we had the council engagement follow-up, which was the recess we had today, was added to the agenda for discussion, as well as the LTC update which we will have after our reports. And yeah, after we added those, we approved the agenda that you have today, and we will do the same for the next meeting. Any questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, so at this point, it's almost 12. So we will break for lunch. Okay, we're just going to check to see if lunch is ready. Yeah.
Can we just do the for discussion, and because that should be the entire meeting?
I wasn't sure how long, if it's going to be short.
I don't think it'll be too long. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Sure, we can get started with our for discussion for the LTC update.
So I'll speak to this. This was a concern brought forward strongly by Huron representatives, and it's something that does strongly, it affects so many students. So if you've noticed, on Western Road, there's a lot of construction that's going on, a lot. And that is part of the city's process of widening the roads to stop the current issues that are happening there, which is traffic. Unfortunately, it's the in the meantime process is what's causing a lot of the issues right now. The biggest issue for students is that their construction there is going to continue until November projected. And the biggest concern right now is that there will not be a stop between Althouse to Oxford and Warncliffe, to the Starbucks. So essentially what would happen is that the maximum amount of distance a student along that strip would have to walk is 700 meters to get to a bus stop. And that's definitely a huge concern for us. We've interacted with our ward councillor as well as the LTC in the city. So I have a meeting with the city staff on Monday. Our conversations with the LTC is essentially it's out of their hands because currently it's not safe to place a bus stop, and they can't stop a bus within that region. And we've brought up a ton of concerns, and Anam can speak to some of these concerns, but the issue is that right now there's nothing that LTC can do because they're driving around every Friday to see if there's a suitable place for them to place a stop, but there isn't. And so that's currently the issue, and we have to talk to the city about what we can do about this issue. Unfortunately, it's kind of in this locked phase right now, but following our conversations Monday, we might have a better understanding of what we can do. So to give it perspective, those stops currently service about 1,500 boardings and alightings. And if we say that probably the majority of that, so probably 1,200 students would be affected, and that's an approximate answer. And it's a really big concern for us, and we've brought that forward. We'll have to see what happens, because if it's a safety issue that they can't do anything about, we're unsure as to what to do, but we're going to try to find a solution with the city on Monday. So that's kind of where we're at.
Just a question. You said, was it November? Is that a confirmed date, and
That's the estimate, yeah.
and that's the road will be drivable and everything, that's
Oh, okay.
I'm just wondering,
it's
yeah.
November 30th is the confirmed date that it'll be
It'll
done.
be finished.
Yeah, the construction. And the issue is that the construction that has to happen in one go. And that's the issue with because we've talked about potentially setting up a temporary stop or focusing on a particular area. The way that the construction project is happening is that it all has to happen in one swoop. So.
For more actionable information, Mr. UC President, I'm meeting with the mayor on Monday to raise this concern directly, just because of the volume of individuals it does affect on Southside, and we're going to try and work through a solution, and hopefully we can have more answers for you.
Yeah, so we're looking at the transit side of things. Unfortunately, LTC's hands are tied with the project, but we're going to look at the staff relationship as well as the political side of things to see if there's anything that we can do.
On a positive note, the 102 and the 2 are getting more frequency in buses. So even though there might be the distance to walk is a little bit longer, you can be sure that people will be able to access buses more frequently than currently.
Councillor Yee, did you have you're good? Councillor Malioko?
Yeah, just another mention, especially down Western Road, well, obviously on Western Road, there also isn't access to a safe sidewalk, which, it's one thing to not have access to the buses, but it's also just, getting to the bus stop. There really isn't a safe way to do that right now.
Yeah, we brought up that concern as well, and we're definitely going to follow up with that, because if there is a silver lining, I think we should focus on having that access in the first place, with a safe way for people to actually walk.
It's a for discussion, so it's anyone who would like to speak on this topic. Councillor Tasia?
Inam Teja, Huron president. As someone who's kind of been living in this construction for the past 2 months, I'd just like to make everyone aware of what might affect your constituents if they live on South Side during the next few months. While the buses are probably the biggest issue for students, those students who live directly on the side of the road that is torn up on Warncliffe and on Western, there's also a lot of other issues. As Ariana pointed out, there's no safe sidewalk and not a lot of safe places to cross the road either. And so some students will literally just have a fence outside the front of their house, and they might have to try and go over a mesh fence to get into their houses. Other thing is a lot of driveways have been totally removed, and so some of your constituents might have issues finding parking. The traffic is really bad because people turning left have no turn lane because it's down to one lane in either direction. So for move-in days, you might want to talk to whoever's coordinating that information to tell parents to show up maybe going north instead of coming up that way for those heavy traffic days. Additionally, there's a lot of things associated with construction that your constituents can expect. They do a lot of road work, oftentimes late at night, early in the morning, lots of dust, lots of mud, lots of inconveniences like that. And they also sometimes shut off the water to that side of the road as well. And sometimes it's happened without notice, sometimes it happens with notice, but it happens at least once or twice a month. So just something to be prepared for if you live on that side, or to be prepared to hear your constituents bring those issues up.
Councillor Marginian?
Councillor Marginian, Science Councillor. Point of information either to Michaela or whoever can speak to this about the frequency of the buses. What's the confirmed frequency? Because right now the 2 bus comes about every single 10 minutes. Is that going to be more often?
I'll get back to you with that information. I have a pamphlet upstairs in my office. I can show it to you after the meeting.
Thank you.
I think it's increased to every 20 minutes for the 2, if that makes sense. It doesn't. To put it in context, that's with the 102 and the 2. It's every 20 minutes, but it'll be probably 15 to 17 minutes.
Okay, Councillor Yee?
Okay, so I guess in regards to the discussion about the construction and the problems that it causes, it seems that it's more so a issue with the city and the poor planning on their part as to what houses on that street are going to do. So in terms of, I guess, as a question for the executive, what exactly could we do while you guys are meeting with the mayor, meeting with the city, and trying to get this solved? What would our role look like? What supports could we give you in terms of that?
Yeah, I think Inam highlighted what to do, which is just communicating these issues, because we don't know exactly all the details until Monday. That's when our meeting's scheduled, and once we have that, we'll definitely follow up on the situation. But in the meantime, it's communicating how this may affect students, and if you know students in that area, letting them know that this is something that in the meantime to kind of be concerned for. I would say that until the time that students come back, it probably won't be something that's going to be flagged on your radar, but a lot of people will be bringing it up come September if there aren't the proper measures taken. So I'd say be patient with us. Wait until after our meetings on Monday. We'll follow up, and then we'll be following this project closely, especially when students start coming back to Western as well. Yeah.
Another thing I would like to add is really take into consideration students with accessibility concerns and make sure to communicate if they require assistance. I think this is an enormous concern I want to bring up with the mayor as well. Regardless if it's 1 or 10 or your 20 students being affected by this, it's still a massive concern for this executive and this council. I think that the fact that there's no sidewalks, there's no stops within 700 meters, and this impacts kind of so many students on their way to school on that south side core of campus that we really need to kind of, Michaela's going to follow up, I think, a little bit with communications in terms of how we actually talk to students about this and make sure that we're still like fighting for them in this respect.
Okay, Councilor Casey. Vanessa Casey, Health Science President. I just have 2 questions. One, will Western students just be given a formal update of what's going to be happening, like just by September? And 2, are the executives able to like give us just a summary of your meetings when they happen?
Yes and yes.
All right. Any other points, Councilor Yee?
So you said that it's planned to be finished by November 30th. Do you know what exactly, like how much of it will be completed by September by the time students come back? Like would it still be just as bad in terms of water shutting off, no access to sidewalks, hopping over fences and all that?
So basically in September, they're switching the side of the street. So.
President Pratt?
Hi. So we'll be releasing, just on the communication side, we'll be releasing a graphic that helps students understand where the closest stop is for them, and for students requiring accessibility vehicles, I suppose, how best to access them as well.
Okay, any other points on this discussion? Okay. Would anyone else like to bring any other for discussion item to the floor? Councillor Foreman? A point of information? Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Marginian, this might seem a little off topic, but does anyone know the bylaw here for riding your bike on the sidewalk? Because I currently have to ride my bike on the sidewalk because I feel like I'm gonna get killed by the cars on Western Road if I bike with them. So.
Sorry, potentially that's something we could discuss off of council floor. Okay,
sounds good.
Councillor Foreman?
Jared Foreman, Social Science President. So as it's been noted earlier, it's a very special day for a certain councillor. So does everyone want to join in a happy birthday sort of sing along?
Happy birthday
to you.
Happy birthday to you.
Cha-cha-cha.
Happy birthday, dear Elliot.
Cha-cha-cha.
Happy birthday to you.
Are you 1? Are you 2? Are you 3? Are you 4?
All right. Any other for discussion? Okay, moving on to new business. All right, seeing no new business, I will look for a mover and a seconder for termination. Councillor Adair as a mover and a seconder, Councillor Vezina. And lunch is served outside. The meeting is now adjourned.